Welcome back to Compton's Corner. I am William Dakota Compton.
And I am Spencer Keck with the Hillbilly Think Tank running for Hardin County Magistrate.
And I'm running for U.S. House in the 2nd District. And on this show, we talk about the issues that actually hit home. The ones folks around here talk about at the diner, at church, or standing out by the mailbox. Today, we are going to be talking about rural Kentucky, our small towns, our farms, our back roads. These places are full of pride and potential, but too often are forgotten by Washington. Joining us today is someone who knows about rural life inside and out. It is my friend Drew Williams, who is running for the 1st Congressional District in Kentucky. Welcome, Drew.
Hi, nice to be with you.
So, Drew,
Welcome, Drew.
so before we get into it, give everybody a little bit of information about you, about your campaign.
Sure. My name's Drew Williams. I'm running for United States House of Representatives here in the 1st Congressional District. That's Western Kentucky, and then dipping under Compton's whole district and wrapping around to go back to Frankfort and Cumberland County and Russell and Boyle and out there. I'm running a community-focused and policy-centered campaign. I'm really trying to put people's voices first. My goal is to build a story, experience, and education-based system once we're in Congress, so that we get more information back to our population and give them a more direct representative democracy. The goal is to make sure people's voices feel like they're being heard every day, and we're able to lift up real community issues that matter to people, rather than just what one side of the aisle or the other kind of gets, wrapped up in at the time. I think that people have a much better ear to the ground of like what their own needs are than we're giving them credit for. So that's kind of my goal, is to put a lot more power back in the we the people.
Yeah, we need that. More power back to the people. And so, welcome again. So, our first topic today is just life in rural Kentucky. So, when people think rural, I get a lot of responses, especially from people outside of Kentucky, where they sometimes think empty, outdated, behind the ball on a lot of things. But that's not the case in Kentucky. I see neighbors helping neighbors, families who work the same land for generations, and folks who show up when things get tough. So, Drew, tell us what life looks like day to day where you live in rural Kentucky, because your district is a lot more rural than mine is.
It is. There is definitely. It's a little bit easier to see wealth disparities between different communities. Even in the same county, you can have spaces that are gated communities, have watered lawns, and have really nice houses, or industry parks and activity centers. Like 100, 200 events happening in a town in the same year, and then you can go halfway across the county, and there's not even its own police station, but like another city is having to do dedicated patrols within that space. There's very little community interaction and engagement. There's very little home ownership. Those kinds of things build into spaces that feel like they're very much neglected. You have what you would consider, for the people who drive them every day, like main roads that don't get a lot of care. Right, they go to their job and back, to the store and back on that main road to them, but it's not a main road in terms of like obviously the grand travel of the United States. And so it gets a lot less funding, and it's a lot less time before again, like you said, like those potholes get fixed. And that's really important to the wear and tear that we're kind of seeing on our economical standards, right? In the sense that every dollar is starting to count a little bit more, whether it's at the grocery store or whether it's at the auto parts shop, because you're dealing with like the wear and tear of just life happening. It seems like especially we're in areas where we buy so much more stuff online and we pay the same price that everybody else does, but our standard of living and the cost of or the systems of income are lower, right? Lower costing here. So like we make less income, but we're still paying $100 for a tool that we buy online to like build something or do work, and that's kind of I think slowly creeping in on people's comfort zones.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, here in my part of the district, I know that as I drive around, I see all these buildings that used to be these amazing buildings, hub centers, that we would see all this activity. They're just starting to lie dormant because people are moving out because of the lack of funds for the roads, the rising prices in grocery and things of that nature. So it's sad to see because these are beautiful communities out here in the rural areas. So
Well,
beautiful.
and it's definitely going to hit home soon because, like, I mean, like 77,000 of the jobs in my district are either educational services or health or social assistance stuff. So, like, healthcare workers and whatnot. And as we see these like cuts both to education and to healthcare, we're going to see job loss in that regard. So, other markets are going to be more saturated. It's going to drive wages down. There's going to be more competition for different jobs, and that's going to have a real big impact on, again, just this kind of stacking effect that we see with overarching costs.
Yeah. Spencer, what about you?
Well,
Your life in rural Kentucky.
my life in rural Kentucky started off in eastern Kentucky, where my grandparents are from, and Elliott County, Morgan County, where my mom and dad are from. But here in Hardin County, where some of my ancestors are from, I've come to find that we are really hurting because you probably know that between 2002 and 2022, Kentucky lost 17,000 farms, and that is 1.4 million acres of farmland that have decreased and are not being used anymore to provide products that America needs. Now we know that the burley tobacco had a lot to do with that, but a lot of it is also the fact that this great farmland is now being turned into sprawling developments, and people are, families are losing their income from these mid-sized farms now being taken over by either sprawling developments, like I said, or larger corporate farms. And I think that's a travesty across America, but especially hitting hard here in Kentucky.
Yeah. And we're seeing some of these farms that have been moved to developments where, with the rains we're having, those are some of the areas that we're getting lots of flooding because they weren't developed properly or they were in low level lands, at least in my area. That's where a lot of our flooding came from. And I'm not sure about in your area, Drew, if that's a true statement.
I'm not very certain about that, so I wouldn't know how to comment. Yeah, about flooding recommendations on the development side. What I have noticed though is that, like, it seems that whether it is like right to repair laws or like effective means in which people can keep up their equipment, and the laws regarding those in big corporations, or if it is treating farmers like public servants, right, and then like helping out with expanding Medicaid access maybe to farm hands or something. But like there has to be a way in which, because it's just, we're seeing that right now with the cattle industry. The calf to cattle farmer is getting like $650 a head in the United States right now, $700, and it's like it's too low for a lot of them to maintain business, and so they're closing up shop, right? Like, a lot of people used to, like, pretty much do farming because they enjoy farming. Like, they can make a living and they enjoy it, not because it's making them millions and millions of dollars, right? And so when a lot of these things start to build on top of each other, they kind of like are like, well, this just isn't. It's also not economically feasible for you to continue this because of the amount of debt or whatever that you're taking into account. We're losing farmers, and you can't. You can teach a farmer, but you really need to raise a farmer. You really need to like let farming come up in a community and like always have someone that's working there who's a generational farmer, or owning it, or kind of giving that kind of guidance. Because what happens is a lot of times you get in there, people who have the technical knowledge and a lot of skills, but it's just really knowing like that land and knowing that space. And we really need, like, we have to do better at divesting from these large corporate farms, right, and getting back to where like we have people that feel like they can be a part of that, and whether or not it's co-op equipment ownage or like group cold storage for farm accommodations, or like, well, obviously we saw the cuts to the USDA when it came to the school or farm to school programs, right, which allowed for a lot of people to pick up those unique farm goods for their school systems, which would both help with a lot of local costs, and it helps with lack of not having to transport those foods off of a great distance. Like when we see cuts like that, we're just kind of telling small farms or specialty crop growers or people who are trying to put like their community efforts into engagement that like we don't want you here. We need people who can brunt the headwinds of when we're trying to give corporate tax write-offs. And so like when they're trying to do that, they need big companies that can bear the brunt of that attack for a little bit so they can also gain at the end. And they can't do that for every small farmer in America, which is unfortunate.
Yeah.
So
And
yeah.
you kind of got a little bit ahead, but that actually is a great segue to the next topic. And Spencer, I'll let you, once I introduce it real quick, but jobs, small farms, and the local economies. So you are hitting the nail on the head already, getting ahead of there. So Spencer, what were you going to say? Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Well,
you.
yeah, Drew, when I met you first, it was out there at Fancy Farm when I heard you give your amazing speech. And, I had a very delicious meal out there at the picnic and was really satisfied with the quality of the food that you produce out there. But I read last year, I think it was, Wendell Berry's book, The Unsettling of America, and it's his seminal work on how creating a monoculture and industrial farming was hurting, Kentucky farms. Well, nationwide, it was destroying farms, farming communities, but also destroying this ability to have more than just soybeans and corn.
Yeah.
I ate great tomatoes, great green beans out there that tasted like they were local. How much of the farming out there, though, is this monoculture, and how much of it is actually diverse farming where people grow, more than one or two crops and actually grow vegetables?
Yeah, no, a lot of the space around what we have is monoculture crop organizing. What I was actually talking with a group of farmers the other day, and we had discussed the conservation plan programs that a lot of spaces have, which has a lot of funding. But what we thought about as a abridgment to that is maybe allowing for that calf to cattle farming to occur on certain areas of their land, and help fund and build that or whatever, so that they can rotate around and help rebuild their own soil, but then paying them, that extra amount to like not grow those crops on that space, and help refertilize it, but also in the same way as in going into specialty crops, right? Like in creating a certain space on your land that goes into specialty crops, and we work to help, create systems that are able to make those ventures profitable or good for the community, right? I mean, and that's the case, right? It's like high nutrient dense crops. A lot of times, like a lot of these greens and whatnot are like more expensive to make and grow, especially in different climates, and they're a lot more finicky. But if we can improve the health of our community, like there's a overall beneficiary cost to that we might want to take on, and I think having that conversation is important. We're definitely way past the ketchup as a vegetable scandals. You know what I mean? So us and the other side right now are arguing to get the chemicals out of our foods and to get like the benefits going. So like we're gonna need to like now that we're all agreeing to that, apparently, like we're all like, oh yeah, hey, healthy food. Like we want to, where were we when Michelle Obama was arguing these points,
Exactly.
or in the past? I mean, like again, people have been in both sides have been arguing about health concerns and foods the whole time. So it's just like, we're never going to beat China in a math contest when we're barely keeping kids fed in general. And so, it's there's a reason why after World War II we initiated school lunch programs. And there's a reason why we care about feeding our communities and making sure that, like, again, I keep wanting to reiterate that like farming is a public service. It's not just a job, and we should treat it like that, so people feel like they can invest in being a farm hand or a farm owner, and it's not just so much of a personal calling, or it's a economic thing. Like we need to shore up those things so they're not dealing with all these brunts of either tariffs or economic fallout or environmental fallout. It doesn't always, I mean, like that's the issue of the day is tariffs, right? But like, we can have a huge drought or a huge flood again, and all that's, a lot of people get hurt. And usually they go out of business. I mean, like we see farms closing every day because something happened. Again, right now it's like your John Deere breaks down, and you don't have the week to wait for their diagnostic tools to come in to fix it. And it's like, okay, great. Like this is very unfortunate for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mentioned that right to repair on someone else's podcast, and they were like, "We didn't even know that was a thing." So you mean to tell me that you have to wait for pre-approved parts for us? Like, yes, that's what the law says right now.
Yeah.
Even if you have a part to fix it, it's like, yeah. So
well, Drew, you bring up the service aspect of farming, and I think that's something similar to what we talk about often on this show when William and I get together. Teachers aren't valued in our society. Farmers aren't valued, and yet we cannot survive without farmers.
Yeah.
And we're surviving on this monoculture, just barely surviving. We have higher disease rates now, higher cancer rates, all kinds of rates of increases that I'm sure can be attributed to the fact that this monoculture is giving us foodstuffs that we didn't eat the way we do now, 50 years ago, 60 years ago. I thought it was extremely interesting you brought up the ketchup deal. I don't know if most people remember Ronald Reagan saying that they didn't need more vegetables in the school lunches because they had ketchup. That was a vegetable.
Yeah.
And you think about that. What's in the ketchup? Well, tomatoes might be one of the products, but one of the main products is corn syrup. And that's back to that monoculture. That corn syrup that's causing the diabetes, that's causing all kinds of problems.
Well, and this is going to be a huge issue going into the RFK's ban on high fructose corn syrup, right? It's like as a community, as a culture, we like you can't just say that that's going to happen one day and expect every farmer who's been farming for corn that's going to go into high fructose corn syrup to just deal with it. You know what I mean? Like just figure out somewhere else to sell your corn.
Well, we do have an alternative that actually is not as bad on soil erosion, and that's we grow in Eastern Kentucky, and I'm sure all over Kentucky, sorghum, and sorghum is much less water intensive. It's very low in its intensity when it comes to how much water it uses, which causes less soil erosion. Why don't we go to what we already have? Sorghum itself as a sweetener is much healthier than corn syrup. We could go back to something we've grown for years before we got into this. Corn had to be the only thing. And, there is a way to still have a sweetener that's not corn syrup, but it's healthy, but we can grow more, more intensely. Is that an option that anybody's thinking about? Do you know? Or
I think the big thing is to make sure that when we because I think that's kind of a big concern amongst farming is choice mechanisms and the level of engagement that they have on choosing crops or engage. Of course they expand so much into the equipment phase of certain crops because everything requires specific. Not exactly specific. I'm sure the watering mechanisms are relatively the same, but certain tractors and equipment. So we would have to figure out ways of offsetting or retrofitting or changing out the ways that they currently experience their land or their product engagement to another large scale operation. Because in that regard, and again, I'm not opposed to anything. I'm not a farmer. My big goal is to listen to their concerns and engagement. I think the more diversified of the crop existence that we have across both our congressional districts, the state, and the country, and the more that we can utilize domestically and not required to sell in order to break even, right? Selling it is a good thing, but if we can make sure that we're kind of shored up without that is good. I don't think that we should be isolationist about it, but I think that we should definitely make sure that we're not going to have hundreds of farms going under because one country doesn't buy our soybeans 1 year. That's a crazy concept in terms of national security and farming security. So I agree with you. I think that diversifying, especially within the districts and across the state, is important. And I'm looking at the map right now of sorghum, and it's like there is so little of it, like right there in that Henderson, Owensboro area. And
Yep.
then it just is not anywhere else in Kentucky. But there's like huge belts of it that come up again. Yeah, through Arkansas, Louisiana, Nebraska.
Well,
Yeah,
it was something that we produced, to say, in this state, in mass. My Mamaw started a sorghum festival in 1970 in Morgan County, Kentucky.
yeah.
And it's still going on. Actually, 2 weekends ago, they had the latest one, and it was actually, there were still producers. I know there's still producers of it there because I can still go buy it there, but not as much as there was.
Mhm.
But the thing is, I hope that you two, when you get into Congress, can look at these subsidies we have for soy and corn, and that those subsidies basically are making these corporate farmers rich, and their kids are actually have trust funds. They're making so much money off of these corporations are. But here in Kentucky, 90% of our farmers are still family farms, and those are dwindling as you talked about, because we're just not grown enough farmers. The average age now is 57, farmers. But we have, if we're going to subsidize, which definitely we need to in this nation, but let's subsidize the things that'll actually get us back to being healthy, which are the vegetables. The vegetable farmers, they don't get any subsidies.
Yeah.
So they're doing
It's
it
interesting.
surely for the love of it and the understanding of what it does for the nation. But all the subsidies and those corporations are getting rich off of industrial farming. They're getting rich off of corn and soybeans.
Yeah. I know when I go around and speak here in this district, a lot of people are afraid of kind of what you said, the small farms being bought out by big corporations and just the lack of those small family farms throughout the district. I
Well, it's
don't
a
know.
big deal. And we
I
heard
don't
right
know if
now that,
you hear that from
JD Vance is part of a corporation that buys these failing farms out,
Yeah.
and makes them into mega.
Yeah.
Well,
so-
and James Comer has a farming speculation company. Where they price it. You know what I mean? So
doesn't surprise me.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
But and something else we do need to mention too, especially with Kentucky and the legalization of medical marijuana, we're starting to see in Ohio County one of the first places that they're going to start growing it, and that's going to start moving across Kentucky as it expands more. So again, concern is how do we make sure that we write legislation to keep it from being one corporate monopoly controlling it and letting small families being able to get in and grow. That's been a big issue that a lot of people have talked to me about too.
Yeah, it's gonna maintain itself as a big issue because they put it in as a like the initial concern is the lottery that they utilize is not prioritizing Kentuckians.
Yeah.
And no state. I think only one state has done a lottery that prioritized their home state people. I think it was Minnesota. I'm not very for certain. I maybe fact checked on that, but they really, all the states really should have done that. They should have made the lottery where at least the first rounds of this were prioritizing Kentucky residents, like long-term residents, as well as they should. And again, this is just it's just a money-making scheme because, like, even as Democrats, we can understand the government just tries to make money sometimes. But like the people who put in their applications they were like $5,000 applications, and they didn't get the money returned if they didn't get the application. So that was just like an amount that they had to choose to eat. And I think only one like dispensary is going to be Kentucky owned. Right, yeah. The rest of them are from the outside of the state, so we're going to have the same issue when it comes to grow operations and making sure that, at some point we like make sure that Kentucky farmers and Kentucky like business owners are the ones who also benefit from this system and not just out of state interests. Like we want that money to grow to families that live here as well. We want rich Kentuckians too.
Exactly.
We don't just want we don't just like want good employee jobs. We want business owner jobs.
Yeah.
So that's important to like kind of mention softly. Again, it's like, it's not about getting rich, but like it's nice when the owner is also your neighbor. Maybe we can say that instead. It's not about the money; it's about the owner also having an investment in the community in which we're building. So it's real weird, man. I don't really understand government, I guess.
You hit the nail on the head when you said having someone who's invested in the community, being the owner of these farms and these corporations, and being able to invest back into our communities.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of rural areas, not just in Kentucky, but in America, we're not seeing that. And that's why some of them do end up deteriorating over time, is that lack of investment. So I think that's a good segue to our last topic. It's kind of a dual topic, but rural healthcare and our rural infrastructure. And I do want to say that healthcare is a big topic that we had just one podcast on 2 podcasts ago. But I do want to start with the infrastructure portion, because in my district, we have Edmonson County, and they have had issues with their water infrastructure for almost a decade. Getting clean water, a federal dam was taken out, if you're not familiar with it, and lowered their water levels, and people are still getting brown water that stains their clothes. They even had to turn off the water in the public schools when students would go for class. And we need to invest in that, because everyone should have clean water. Everyone should have clean water. And that's a big issue here.
Well, and that's the interesting consideration, is that like it's weird. Cause I was at an event the other day, and it's kind of a little bit of a segue, but I'll keep it short. But I was at an event the other day, and we were leaving, and I was saying something to somebody, and I was like, "Oh yeah, you of course want lower income tax for lower income Americans," and he's like, "Whoa, like that's a huge, like, you should say that more often." And I was like, "Yeah, but like, isn't that like what we assume?"
Yeah.
Is what's supposed to be said, right? Like, and of course, like, you're like, well, everybody deserves clean water, and it's like, but like, usually, like, we're trying to figure out like very unique answers to the consideration. Mostly, I think the unique answer is how's it getting funded? Not that it's important. So like that's going to be the consideration, like, going forward, is like, because almost everybody's like, relatively on board with like we don't need to be raising the debt ceiling. So like, balanced budgets are like really important, like maybe not an amendment, but like kind of a goal to like reach that. So like we're gonna have to be taking money out. If we're gonna be taking money out, or we're gonna be reducing like lower spending, are we gonna get interactions that are taking out of like our offensive or our like other aid conversations in order for us to fund these considerations. I think that these considerations are important. My thing about infrastructure was going to be about housing. I think
that's a good one too. Yeah.
Kentucky needs 206,000 more units this year, and they're going to need 280,000 units by 2029. And we need systems that allow people to get into homes, but we also need to be building smaller, more manageable homes. I need a housing block to show up that is 50 to 70K homes, brand new. That'd be fantastic. I don't care what the size of the house is. People just need to own it, and not be renting it. You know what I mean? They need to be investing in their assets, not just throwing it away. So there's a lot of kind of conversations about like what those needs are. I think that there's broadband and energy infrastructure and cell phone communication issues, and I have like 6 places on the way that I drive from my house to town where I like have low cell service, and that's just like a 15-minute drive, right? And so like it's really important to note that there's. And again, we were supposed to get a $3 trillion infrastructure bill, and we got a $1 trillion infrastructure bill, and we are continuing to just see the ramifications of not investing.
Exactly.
In those spaces. So I mean, like, it's the unfortunate part is like, I guess I don't know what the platform is there, because it's so weird. It's like I promise to want to rate raising tax revenue or are we allocating tax revenue? I want to allocate tax revenue to fix water pipes, and it's like, yeah, like people shouldn't really have like an opposition to that engagement. That's the hard part there. So I don't really know. Like I see those things as being bipartisan or nonpartisan or just it should happen. But then again, they don't happen. So like something is standing in the way of that.
I noticed. I'm not sure if you guys remember this. The very first time we saw that big black magic marker come out, for an executive order, back first term, it was right after the election, and Duke Energy had just dumped a whole bunch of coal ash into the river there in West Virginia and even seeped down into Virginia. Folks all along that area had to have bottled water shipped in. They couldn't brush their teeth with the water, couldn't cook with it, nothing. And what was the first thing he did with that magic marker? Signed a bill allowing companies, corporations not to be punished when they did something to the water.
Yeah.
I mean, he stated it out fact. Oh, this is helping our businesses, helping our economy. What on earth are you talking about? Besides the fact that all you care about is dollars, corporations. Drinking water means, nothing to you if it has to do, if it's going to hurt the bottom line, that you make people have clean water. That just right there, I don't know what they're watching on Fox. If they don't play it there at all, on Newsmax, I couldn't believe that we could reelect this guy again or not impeach him just for that. But
yeah, and I let his words speak for himself for sure.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it doesn't take much to. I mean, like that, like you said, like it's. You can look at any of the executive orders or conversations.
And that was the very first one.
Yeah.
We're getting rid of these punishments for companies, having accidents. Like what?
One day it will be we the people's turn. We just got to sit patiently and cross our fingers and stay out of the roadways. Apparently, and it'll come around. They keep promising it'll work. Yeah, just one of these decades.
By the time we all got cancer from the drinking water.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And so let's move over to the healthcare side of things. I know that big topic is the rural hospitals on that list of 35 in Kentucky. 4 of them are in my congressional district. I know of at least one in your district. I'm not sure if there's any more that's on that list.
I think just one on the list. There are other ones that are having conversations about services. Yeah. I don't think, again, that's the big thing is being effective but not being alarmist in the sense that, like, these buildings themselves, the operations and the units itself may not close, like they may not like go out of business, but they may shutter down to the point where they don't have the services or the staff or the engagement. They may be paying their like board and the people that like need to be there in order to like keep the space going in their most like, vitally pressing conversations like emergency room systems. But to have services, that's a pretty much assured conversation, right? Like, we know that that's going to happen because there's like $28 billion in Kentucky that is going to be in the proposed Medicaid cuts, right, in 2027. Yeah. So, like, if all that works out the way they assume. Now, the assumption to that also is that the people who are getting reduced or removed from their Medicaid rolls are refusing to do the 80 hours a month. Because if they're going to do the 80 hours a month, they get to keep their Medicaid services. So, like, that will also be a concern of, like how much these effects are shuttered is how many people still maintain their Medicaid eligibility. So, like, that could also be a thing. Now, as somebody who does community service all the time, I don't know how they're monitoring 20 hours of community service a week. I don't understand any of that because, like, I do 20 hours of community service a week, but, like, I don't tell anybody. Do I start telling somebody? Who do you tell? How do you prove that? that'll be a whole different, like, oh, I walked the road today and picked up trash for 4 hours. Like,
Yeah.
jot me down, bro. Like, I don't know how that works.
What what gets me is that most of these people that I know, that or family members that I have that are on Medicaid, it's due to having severe mental illnesses. That's why they're young folks needing this Medicaid. They can't keep a job. How on earth are they going to do this community service work when they need it themselves? They're the ones needing the volunteer help with just brushing their teeth, or remembering to brush their teeth, or remembering to take a shower.
Yeah.
How on earth are you going to get someone with that type of illness to go out and do 20 hours of community service work when they
Yeah.
can't even take care of themselves? That's why they're on Medicaid.
Well, I mean, Kentucky's
Well,
like what 49th in undiagnosed mental health disorders, and that scale's way higher for men than it does for women. But like,
Yeah.
if we don't, and that's a real big reason why we definitely need some kind of system of non, like, I'm not taking your name down, but we're like doing the Catholic confessional where you can come see a therapist anonymously, and I can give you the information based on what we've gathered, so that you can know if you need to go to see a therapist or not. Because a lot of people are like, oh, I don't want to go see one because they're going to write me up as a quack and they're going to take my guns. And it's
Well,
like, well, maybe we don't do that. You know what I mean? Like,
tied right into that is the fact that one of the plagues upon Kentucky farming families is the fact that the stress of not being able to make enough money to keep your farm going, or wondering if you're going to be able to be, is causing higher suicide rates than you would expect. The numbers are pretty staggering. So if your kids see your parents going through that, are they going to want to hop in to this, in my opinion, extremely noble profession? If they know, hey, the country doesn't care enough to give my parents Medicaid to help them with their mental stress caused by this farming operation that only makes about $10,000 profit a year.
It says suicide rates amongst farmers and ranchers are the 6th highest among all occupational groups.
Yeah.
So it's just like, I mean, like, and you have to train farmers to deal with stress. Like, again, like the whole raising a farmer kind of thing. Like, they need to be built for stress. Like, farming's a stressful job, but the stress needs to be something that is like, we like help manage, right? Like, the fact that like we see these numbers here, and farming like occupation people don't automatically qualify for free therapy at any point in time. Like, that should just come with I've signed up for this job and I've been here for 6 months.
Well, when I worked for the VA, there was a farmer who was turned away from receiving full VA aid because they said his land says that he had too much value. He was, as you call, he was dirt rich, but dirt poor. The land said it was worth a lot of money if he were to sell it, and then he'd be able to afford health care by selling his land. Well, he sells it now. He has no livelihood, but his livelihood made him dirt poor.
Yeah.
And it was a travesty. Luckily, I had a really good person I was able to turn him to and get him that medical care. But that's what we're talking about with doctors that aren't veterans, and don't have VA care. They should be getting Medicaid, Medicare, just automatically. As a doctor, we should do that as a service to them for giving us the service of providing healthy food,
Yeah. No, it's an interesting, like, of course, like every aspect of politics and general life is so intertwined, and we don't think about that until it hits like an intersectional point. But like we really have to start looking at a lot of these systems more holistically and like as a multifunctioning pieces. Because when we help address, like again saying like farming is a public service, they probably need their Medicaid covered, right? Like government health care, right? Like if you told every farmer they were a government worker now, right? And like started building into a pension and like other systems that like were helpful to them for working those
Yes.
jobs, you would get people who would want to do that for those benefits. And the big thing is that farmers could continue to pay their employees the same way that they were paying them before, and you would get better quality people. You get, people who want to be retained on. They don't want to be fired. They don't want to be let go when the season's gone. They're like, what else can I do? Because I want these benefits. And farmers can't offer those things right now because, like, obviously we want food prices to be low. We're already subsidizing a whole bunch already. But like, we're all here advocating more or less for like a more accessible and affordable healthcare system. So like, obviously veterans, obviously our government employees and firefighters and teachers and whatnot. But like, what about farmers? Isn't that a good inroad of adding a group of people into the conversation of who we like support with a more universal healthcare system? Without, like it's a soft launch of more people. Let's show that this has a more universal effect, because the biggest issue we have right now is that we're really okay with operative and recovery systems in America, but we're really bad with preventative systems. And every time we implement a preventative system, we don't give them enough time to lower the costs of the other two. And then we're like, oh, this preventative system's so costly, we got to get rid of it again. And then we don't. So like, if we had better preventative health care, because I mean, construction workers and farmers and physical jobs are so much more dangerous and hard on the body long term, and you're around all these chemicals and other things. So you got internal issues. You need to go to the doctor a whole lot more than anyone else. And they're probably the most least likely person to go to the doctor. So like their long-term healthcare costs are like those of like veterans who've been around like all kinds of crazy stuff, like burn pits, and so like that's just a really interesting like dichotomy of like where we see like, oh, well, healthcare costs so much. It's like, well, yeah, because we only deal with people when they're in the traumatic state of their healthcare need, because it's so much more costly.
And I ran into in my over 20 years in the military, I ran into quite a few fellow rural folks who they had joined because they were sending that a lot of their paycheck back home to mom and dad on the farm to be able to survive and keep the family farm from crumbling. And their hope was that if they could make it to 20 years, retire, without being shot in their 20-year war, that they could then take over the farm and have that pension to supplement the fact that they knew mom and dad only made about $10,000 a year.
Yeah, it's just crazy, isn't it? Like, and this is really like a big, like one of the things I've been trying to like float or tie in is that you have so many people in these communities, especially when you get closer to big cities, but they're like adjacent to a bunch of farmland and engagement, that want to do like the community garden, they want to do the community service, they want to like find ways to engage, and like you could have some of these farms be like training centers, right, for community engagement in terms of like, we help subsidize like their advancement in technology. We help give them more services. They give us the expertise and the mentorship to like community leaders and people who want to like form like community gardens or like learn stuff in other spaces. And then we were able to like transform some of their land into like effective conversations for the way that we can engage our population, both in like self-sufficiency, because that's like I know in my area, like a lot of the people who do community service needs that like they like they're broader groups that like pick a need. All of them are focusing on food security and hunger, because that's like the main thing that's going to start hitting folks when the prices get too high on some things is grocery prices. And so like there's a lot of ways in which we can engage the farming community like in a modern aspect of things, especially with social media. Can you imagine like having influencers like learn things online and utilize that as like their own goals? Same thing with like you ever see any of the kids shows where they have like the playhouses where there's like a big fake house that has all the floors in the rooms, and you're always wondering like how does this family live in this weird house? And it's like, it's not a real house, it's like it's a house at the end of a road that they just built, and it has all the white walls and the foam pits and stuff like that for YouTube videos. Well, it's like the same thing really in a lot of these engagements that like community service and outreach and stuff like that we need to be able to like have those spaces to do that, and it'd be cool to like have our community come out and like function that way. That's kind of like my big goals, is kind of finding really cool, unique ways to get us involved to get on the ground level, because I feel like too often we just like rely on systems to work for us, especially as like the left, who's like looking for a lot of like social and like justice based conversations, especially around like housing and food. There's a group in Paducah area called Project Die Hard that is trying to help house veterans and stuff like that, and give them like pathways to better themselves. And so like it's really important that we look at like the ways the communities want to get engaged and like uplift that. And I feel like farming has such like a key role in that, and like we just need to figure out how to extrapolate it or pull it from its moorings as more traditional agriculture.
Yeah. So we are nearing the 50-minute mark. So closing this up, Drew, any final closing remarks for us?
I think that it's really important that anybody listening to this that thinks that they want to run for office, you do it. The conversation's never been more at a point where people are looking for new answers and new conversations, and you probably have one, and you have a unique stance on something, and we need all voices at the table. We need people up and down the ballot in every single spot. That helps drive turnout. It helps drive engagement. It helps keep candidates doing the right things and being the right people when we have that level of competition and that level of interest in the political process. It's really important that we take the time while we're active, like we all are here, just by being kind of on the channel to give our community a voice. And so that'd be my closing remarks, is that like you matter, and I'm here for you, and I hope you're here for me, and we can all, it doesn't matter if you're running for city council or justice of the peace or constable, low level positions or whatever. They're just as important when we get down to like raising up our communities, because like you can see like small areas, Beaver Dam, they built an amphitheater. They bring in all kinds of money now, right? Yeah. Like, and I'm like, that's something like we need to figure out what our thing is, like, and we need to build community calendars that like actually like work for every community. Because some have them, some don't. Some of them are just like a town instead of their whole county. Everything's really confusing. Nobody knows where events are and things are happening. Like, we need to figure out a way to modernize that to make it to where we all feel like we're connected again. Because I think the community like triumphs over these kinds of issues that we're facing right now. And so like that's kind of what we need to focus on is what we have going for us collectively.
Awesome. Spencer, any closing remarks from you?
Well, yes, I just, to me, rural America that's my favorite America. And that's Kentucky is full of that. I love big city Louisville, visiting there, and playing there. But here in Hardin County, we just have so much to offer. But the backbone of it is this farming history, heritage, tradition that I don't want to see lost. And I think back to the scripture today at church. It was about that planting that seed. If you just had that faith of the mustard seed, or the size of a mustard seed, what could be done? And I think I've got that faith in us. It might be tiny, but but its potential is big. And I really hope that we can grow what we're talking about here into something meaningful. People realize, hey, we need to save our farmers and save our state while we do that. Because that these tight knit rural communities they have some really good values that we shouldn't just discard for industrial farming. And let's keep the small family farms alive.
Yeah. So, like I said earlier, when I speak to people outside of rural communities, first thing that they always say is, "Oh, it's empty, uneducated," and they use hillbilly in a negative manner. And these rural communities, I've seen our communities stand up together and lift each other up in the worst of times, through natural disasters, through economic hardships. these people here are some of the kindest, most genuine people that you will ever meet in America, in our rural communities. So standing up and fighting for them to have better lives, that's what it's all about in my mind. Because I could not ask for any better neighbors or friends living in rural Kentucky.
Absolutely.
And that's why I'm fighting for it. So one last thing, Drew, I mentioned earlier you're running against James Comer in the first congressional district. Real quick plug. Where can people find information about you?
Sure. You can find my website at williams4ky or williams4kentucky.com. My Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter and Blue Sky handles are Williams4KY1, FORKY1, and that's all the socials I have. And I have been doing a little bit better job of being active on all of them instead of just Facebook and slowly TikTok. But Instagram is the branding page, and we should treat it like that. And I'm trying to be a little better about being active on that. It is so. And then I'm at events, hopefully all around the district. So I'm going to do a better job of posting my schedule as well on social media, so people can know where I'll be.
Awesome.
Here for you.
Yeah, so thank you so much for being on here. And
Absolutely.
anyone who is in the first congressional district, please go follow Drew Williams. Go like and share his information. Tell everyone you know about him, because he truly is someone that we need in Congress up there. And I can't wait to be working with him in Washington.
Yeah, thanks for the invite. This has been great.
Yeah, so thank you all so much. And next week on Compton's Corner, we will be talking about our labor unions. So please come out. Please watch the stream next week. It'll be a great conversation. Thank you all.
And let's remember, you love one another, take care of one another, because we are our brother's keeper and our sister's keeper. Y'all have a great one.
Yes, sir.